Okay. Nope, we're good to go. All right, good
All
afternoon,
right.
everyone. Thanks for attending. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Dominika Parry. She's the founding president of 2C Mississippi. She's an environmental economist by training, professionally, and personally is passionate about climate change. Dr. Parry established 2C Mississippi to promote a bipartisan, science-based dialogue and action on climate change in Mississippi. So very pioneering work. Dr. Parry received her PhD in 2003 from Yale University School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, where she also trained as a postdoc, working on the evaluation of air pollution damages. Dr. Parry is a native of Poland, but after 25 years of moving across the United States, she chose Mississippi as her home. She lives with her 2 sons, husband, 2 dogs, y'all keep track of this, 9 fish, a hermit crab, and an occasional toad in Richland, Mississippi. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Parry.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me, for inviting me. I am an unusual speaker, probably for you, for a variety of reasons, starting with my accent, which is not from Mississippi. So as Erica said, I'm originally from Poland. If you guys have trouble understanding my accents, please do wave and stop me, and I will try to slow down or repeat. I also am not an epidemiologist, or I'm not anymore a researcher, but hopefully what I have to share is going to be of some interest to you. I lead this small organization, 2C Mississippi, which to my best knowledge is the only climate organization in the entire state. We are relatively new, but got a lot of support both locally and nationally. We have great funders and great partners. So all of our work is really a joint support. It's really a joint effort, rather, that wouldn't happen without the joint support. So first, a few words about me. I come from a world that doesn't exist anymore. I was born behind what was called the Iron Curtain in Poland, which used to be part of the Soviet bloc. Life was grim and gray and depressing. When I grew up, we believed that nothing can change, that the authoritarian regime of the Soviet Union is just there. That's how the world looked like, right? We've been shown on TV the power of the Soviet Union, the tanks, the parades, and nobody thought the system can collapse until it collapsed. And I watched it as a high school student. I watched with disbelief how it all crumbled. I watched first free election in my country, in Poland. Then I watched how the wall fell down. Then the entire Soviet Union fell down. Okay. I went to a store on a day when free market was introduced overnight. And I watched ladies running around changing prices. Bread was $50 and then 20 cents and then $30, exactly as you would learn in a textbook in economics. That's how it would work. It really did. And I watched it. I didn't really think much about, being from a post-communist country much until I moved to Mississippi. Before that, I came to the US. The fall of the communism allowed me to do that. I got my education. I traveled a lot. I used to do a little bit of research. I lived in 6 states, and all of my work was about climate change. So when I moved to Mississippi, things got a little bit complicated. Mississippi is not like a place that any other place that I've been to in the United States. Experience was somewhat shocking. It is a beautiful place with wonderful people, but it is a completely red state with this tiny little dot of blue, which is Jackson, Mississippi, the capital of the state, and where issues of climate are as difficult and impossible to talk about as it gets. All of the Republicans don't even want to talk about it. They get aggressive and their knowledge is very low. The Democrats have very, very low knowledge. And despite best intentions, it's really hard to have a dialogue. And often people ask me, what on earth are you doing? Why are you still there? Why are you doing climate change in Mississippi? And so when I thought about it, my best answer was, I think it's because of the experience of watching Soviet Union collapse. If an unbelievably powerful empire could crumble like that because of the just cause, because of enough people believing in it, then I can do something about climate change in Mississippi. And you probably heard about Jackson in Mississippi for the first time today. Maybe you've heard about it a few months ago because we became actually a headline because of water crisis. Probably you are like a giganormous majority of the United States. People did not know about us and heard about us a few months ago. And we gained a lot of interest, for which we are very grateful. So people from all over the country started coming to Jackson, trying to figure out what the heck is going on with water crisis. All of a sudden, there is no water in the United States, no drinking water. What is this? This is the article that came to my mailbox, and when I read it, I laughed out loud because it illustrates beautifully how little we really know about places like Jackson. People from Yale, from the School of Public Health came. People from Berkeley came as well and probably had the same impression. And I'm going to tell you what they said. This is a quote. Everyone we talked to spoke of issues they had that were not related to water. Because the water crisis is such a big deal, we thought that would be the focus, but that wasn't always the case. They were surprised. I think it isn't important for the federal government to step in. It's not just about the water. It's poverty, unsafe living conditions, unemployment, and food shortages. Duh. Did you think that issues like that happen in lovely, wealthy neighborhoods? No. Places like Jackson are throughout the country, and they don't have one problem. They have systemic problems. Let me tell you a few things to just set up the background. You may have heard that the city of Jackson, is predominantly African American. We have 82% of African Americans and 16% of Caucasians. Those Caucasians, just like the white people throughout the whole state, are Republican, and they are MAGA Republican. They are really hard to work with or talk to. But what is also important is how segregated the city is. This is a map that shows you racial distribution. So each dot is a person. Blue dot is a white person. Green dot is a black person. All the white people happen to live voluntarily in the northeast of Jackson. So we are highly segregated, but that is not the most important issue. The most important issue is the difference in income. Caucasians in Jackson, median household income is $55,000, while African Americans is $29,000. This should be a shocking difference, but think about it. This is, and you are epidemiologists, so you do know a little bit about statistics. This is a median household income. Think about the tails, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the tails later on. When I moved in here, I was heavily criticized for saying that it feels like this is a third world country, and nobody wants to talk about it because it doesn't sound good. So what we are dealing with in Jackson, Mississippi, and this is a slide that is made for my presentations about heat. This was my major focus initially. But for the word heat, we can now put any other word. Flood, sea level rise, COVID. Everything is a social justice issue in places like Jackson. Everything is a silent and invisible killer of silenced and invisible people. And my little organization is trying to do whatever we can to give a voice to those people. We know that Jacksonians been failed at all levels of government. And this is not just the story of heavily racist state government. That is a story, and I'm not questioning that. But we didn't really get much interest from the federal government until very recently. And the actions of the municipal government, which is almost entirely African American, have not been very successful either. There have been a lot of mistakes made. There have been a lot of egos. Overall, the whole system been not successful. I've tried to work at each of those levels, and it did not work. So what is a woman to do? What I've decided to do is to focus on hyper-local level, to address issues in a systematic way, because the systematic failure is what we need to talk about, systematic governmental failure, and address it at a hyper-local level with communities. We started kind of randomly with heat. It could be floods, it could be something else. We started with heat. Heat is one of those cases where it's easier to talk to people about climate change through heat because it's experiential. People can feel it, can understand it much better than some more abstract issues. We knew, and everybody knows because of the expression global warming, that averages go up, right? But lately, we've heard also about extremes going up, right? So we have a new expression of heat domes moving. We hear about records going up. And when we talk about all of that in Mississippi, I get a response, oh, honey, this is Mississippi. You are not from around here. It's always been hot, right? Well, that's an issue. If you don't understand the risk of heat in places like Mississippi, you are in serious trouble. Because what happens now is the change that occurred in averages, right? So the shift in the average, that's bad. But really what you are worried about is the shift in the tail. The magnitude of people exposed to extreme heat becomes a very, very high risk. And places like Mississippi that are already very, very hot, becoming a little bit more hot, become fatal. We already know, and we are trying to explain that this is a new normal. This is not just a temporal anomaly, right? The heat wave frequency is increasing, duration is increasing, the seasons stretch out, the intensity is growing. It's not going away. We also got some interesting data that shows us the impact of heat, not just on the mortality from heat strokes, which is usually badly coded, the data is lousy, so people would argue this is not a big deal. It affects overall mortality, cardiovascular especially, and there are those two studies that came out lately from UPenn that show or confirm rather that African Americans are much more at risk from heat than other groups. That's very, very significant for places like Mississippi. So in addition to this inequality, we also have a special spatial issue. We have what's called urban heat islands. Probably many of you have heard about that. Heat is not distributed equally. When the surfaces warm up, there are some that do not cool off the same way. So when the sun sets, the heat evaporates, re-radiates back to the atmosphere, unless it gets trapped in cities, when there is a lot of dense infrastructure of concrete and asphalt, the heat doesn't have a place, doesn't have a space to escape. It bounces off from one wall of a building to another and creates those bubbles. Those heat bubbles, urban heat islands, tend to be much, much hotter. Think about 4 degrees Celsius difference between some of the urban heat islands and other places in a city. That's life and death if you don't have air conditioning. And in places like Jackson, often you have air conditionings, but you also have holes in walls, so they are not very effective, or you simply don't have money to plug them in. So we decided to learn a little bit more about where those urban heat islands are in Jackson. And especially, we knew we're going to have an issue because as we got interested in it, a study came out that showed a very strong correlation between redlining districts and urban heat islands. Formerly redlined districts right now are urban heat islands. And this was a study made based on 103 or 108 cities. Right now, one of the authors of this study is our close partner, working with us on all of our heat and not just heat projects. The clear observation is that places that used to be redlining districts remain poor districts that are full of concrete, have very little green infrastructure, and as such became or stayed urban heat islands. We collected data, becoming part of what's called Heat Watch, which is this initiative sponsored and organized by NOAA, but carried out by CAPA. CAPA is an organization led by one of the authors of that article, that paper. They send us these unassuming looking pipes that have really sophisticated chips measuring continuously humidity and heat. And on one very, very hot day, we got volunteers from Jackson to drive very slowly around special routes throughout the city to measure heat. We got 6 sets of measurements for heat and heated humidity together from, I think, 9 routes. And based on satellite imaging from that, urban heat island maps were created. These are publicly available on our webpage if anybody is interested. So first we bounced it off the redlining districts. That doesn't work great for Jackson because Jackson grew so much. So this doesn't include really a majority of the city. But if you just look with a naked eye, you can tell that the areas that are primarily white are not urban heat islands. What a surprise. Solutions to it are really not that complicated and expensive. It's just planting more green infrastructure. Areas that are covered with vegetation don't heat up the same way, cool off much faster, right? And throughout the country and the world, there are some amazing and really not very expensive solutions of green infrastructure. We could plant trees, we could make green sidewalks, green parking lots, we could have vertical gardens, and throughout all of that, we could also produce food. That's very, very important for the system solutions. We go into places which are extremely hot. Those places are also likely to have very low income. Those places are also very likely to have low access to fresh and healthy foods. So food production may be a goal that should be considered there as well. So green infrastructure comes with a variety of benefits, right? It removes pollutants, of course, reduces the temperatures, also reduces costs of cooling off the buildings, promotes biodiversity. If you design it the proper way, it helps with rainwater, reduces noise. It's really good for our health, increases productivity, creativity, improves well-being, direct health benefits. It's low cost, but also, if properly designed, could help with safety, a very, very important issue in Jackson, which is one of the least safe places in the United States. If properly designed, meaning if we use areas which are right now abandoned, if we clear them up, if we light them up properly, the impact could be dramatic on safety. And with that, we could also promote private and public redevelopment of certain areas. If we go in with a public investment for public areas and coordinate it with private investment, then the impact can be substantial, economical, and very well measured. That's what we are trying to develop as we are thinking about our projects. Of course, with all of that, we are trying to plug in as much food production as possible. So the first location of the urban heat island is Farish Street, which tells you exactly nothing. But let me introduce Farish Street to the world. It is a spectacular place with a spectacular history. It is a street in downtown Jackson, which used to be the most prosperous place of business and culture for African Americans in the whole state. Because of segregation, Black businesses, restaurants, and people were not welcome. So this one street became a center for all of it. Doctor's offices, law offices, restaurants, jazz clubs, you name it. It was a very vibrant, beautiful place. You could see that this is something that stuck with our memory, with the general city memory, because right now it looks very different. It is a picture of urban decay. As 60s came in, businesses could spread out throughout the cities, throughout the city. White businesses were moving in, Black businesses were moving out, and Farish Street looks pretty bad right now. Because of its cultural significance, there were numerous attempts to revitalize it, and they were not working. The street looks exactly like this right now. The reasons for it, there are many reasons, but one major one is usually we had external investors coming in, trying to make it whatever they wanted without talking to people. And that didn't work. All of them failed. So what we are trying to do is to start from talking to people about their vision for the street, their vision for the city, and based on that, develop our solutions. Community co-creation process is basically at the heart of all of our work. We find the location. Farish Street was found through community co-creation process, focus groups, community meetings, surveys. And then we develop the green infrastructure step by step with community. We identify the exact spots where we're going to go with the intervention. We coordinate it with possible private investment. So this area here is about to become a center for multi-use building where different businesses, cafes are about to be introduced, and we want to do kind of simultaneous unveil of both projects so we can have larger impact. This would help with safety as well. So there's going to be a chunk of the street that it's going to be safer and already developed, and hopefully the development will spread. Again, every item of the projects that we are introducing is developed with people. It starts from very, very general idea, And then we go down and literally people tell us where to put the trees, where to put the lettuce. At the same time, we realize it's a pretty small piece of the city, right? Because the city is in disarray, we do work with communities on a small scale, and it's going to take a while. In the meantime, the heat is rising. So we need immediate solutions, which is an immediate intervention. So we need heat emergency plans for when it gets extremely hot. There are great options for heat emergency plans at city levels, at state levels. We don't have that option. We want to develop community level ones. We are going to work with a couple of neighborhoods, but hopefully once we develop a project like that that works well, we can use it as a template, and different neighborhoods throughout the city can then duplicate it. Hopefully then we can get to the city level, right? So cities like Boston, Chicago, they have phenomenal, very detailed, 100, 200 pages heat resilience emergency plans. This is very clearly specified how the information is spread out, who is responsible at every level, what are the options for people once the emergency is announced, where people can go. They're wonderful cooling centers. And it doesn't work. And I'm not saying it myself. This is what the authors of those plans told me. It doesn't work because nobody asked people if they would like to go to cooling centers that are wherever they are at the moment, right? So that is a very important information for us. We again go back to our idea of just setting up the elements that we are going to be looking at. What do we need to have? We need to have a system of announcing the emergency, following up with a communication system that works for this community. So internet may not be the best solution. Cell phones may not be the best solution. People who need the intervention and support the most, they may not be able to check their phones. We may need to go door to door. People would not open doors for everybody, right? We need to come up with trusting designated volunteers who would not be scary and the doors would be open. We need to come up with an evacuation plan that people would accept, places that they would be okay going to, possibly churches, and a lot of support at home. Many people would just not want to go anywhere, right? And so in order to make it work, we again go back to meeting with communities. As we go meet with the communities, I literally trip over another problem. The neighborhoods where we are working in is the tail of that distribution. So remember, for African American in Jackson, the median income is 29. These are census tracts. We have areas with $18,000, $15,000 for household income. That's almost 70% below poverty line, right? That's a third world kind of situation. So we go in there to a community building where we want to talk about heat emergency. And I literally trip over another issue. I trip over a sandbag. I ask what's going on because there are sandbags all over the building on a sunny day. And I'm told that floods are so frequent now, they don't even move the sandbags. So when I go back to my office, I check it out and I find out that indeed, this whole neighborhood is not just an urban heat island. It's not just one of the poorest places in the city, not just in the city, in the entire country. This is actually 95th to 100th percentile of the lowest income in the entire country, according to the EPA screening system. According to the same indicators, this is also the 100-year flood zone. Of course, now it happens much more frequently than 100 years. That just makes you wonder what else is happening in that area. So quick check. We have really, really bad pipes over there. So sewage backs up whenever there is a flood. Raw sewage backs up to the streets and enters people's houses. I don't have to explain to you how incredibly dangerous and risky this situation is. Given all of that, again, maybe something can be done. Maybe something relatively simple and inexpensive can be done temporarily. And this is our next project, the latest one that we literally got funding 2 weeks ago to work on. And that's a system of micro parks. It may sound funny to introduce parks in a very, very poor neighborhood like that, but it just may work. Here's the idea. This is an area with a lot of abandoned property, blight. We already have a small organization, which is called Revitalize Mississippi, that purchases those in order to clear them and hopefully put low-income houses on those properties. They have financial issues, so they mostly just buy them and clear them whenever they can. They can't afford really putting too many houses. So instead, we offered to work with them and use, at this point, about 15, 20 of those properties to create a system of micro parks. If those micro parks are properly positioned, they don't just remove the blight, they don't just decrease crime, which is extremely high there. They don't increase just property prices. They could actually very effectively in small areas regulate flood issues through systems of rain gardens. The location would be determined by hydrological study and of course local knowledge. But in addition to that, once we have this system of 20 little properties with rain gardens, we could lay over that different functions, additional functions that would be desirable. We could have pollination gardens there and little educational sites. Kids in Jackson, especially in areas like this, they don't go outside. It's not safe. So clearing places, making them safe, lighting them up, so making sure that there is a high visibility that increases safety, may encourage schools to actually do field trips and going outside and teaching kids about nature. We really hope that part of those areas would be used for food production and that kids would be involved in that those initiatives as well. And finally, we are really hoping that it's going to be a huge element for community building. These areas are so dangerous that people don't even know their own neighbors. They don't socialize outside of their houses because it's simply not safe. So providing safe places where people can just sit down and talk may be very, very beneficial. So the whole idea of projects that we are working on is to identify places of need and coming up with projects that are desirable by the community and serve systemic purposes, not just one function, but lay as many desired functions as possible. In order to do that, we are looking into data and we are trying to find as much local data as possible. So we are layering information about health, which is very, very poor. Of course, socioeconomic data, some data about heat, tree coverage, and based on that, I identify future locations for our projects. So in a way, what I'm trying to think is we are trying to identify not just urban heat islands, but really vulnerability islands, places that require intervention at very many levels, where climate is one of the many issues that we are facing, and solving climate issue can provide also benefits that are on the top priority list, like crime and safety. So that's what we do. I hope it wasn't too scary and depressing. If you have any questions, that would be good time now.
In regards to the micro parks, like these environments, is there a plan for sustainability and like management after they're like established?
Very good question. Most grants that we were looking into are usually planning grants, and these are horrible. The grant that we got for Farish Street is a planning grant, and now I'm struggling really trying to make sure that I get money for maintenance. The grant that we got for the micro parks involves planning, putting the trees in and whatever infrastructures need to be put in, and 5 years of maintenance. Ideally, we would like longer than that, but 5 years is a good start.
That's it. Any other questions? Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Any questions in the chat? We're just gonna check the chat.
Oh, a couple people have raised hands. Oh, no, that's topic. Never mind.
I was just saying.
It doesn't look like it.
No, thank you, Dr. Parry. Nice seeing you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.